Welcome everybody, this is Lynette Kraft from ACSM. We are starting our brown bag just a little bit late this morning, or this afternoon. Apologize for that. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker, and we're having some technology issues, so we may have to do it where we advance the slides for Dr. Baumgartner and we're waiting to get his slides up, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you about Dr. Baumgartner. He is the chief of the U.S. Air Force Exercise Science Unit at Joint Base San Antonio-Randolph in Texas. He also serves as the headquarters Air Force Exercise Physiology Consultant, and he's responsible for developing the current Air Force physical fitness test and standards. Dr. Baumgartner is a retired Air Force physiologist. He retired in 2001. He has his bachelor's degree in biology from the U.S. Air Force Academy. His master's and doctoral degrees are in exercise physiology from the University of New Mexico and the University of Texas at Austin. Dr. Baumgartner is also an associate editor on the Translational Journal of ACSM, and he's been very involved with the Military Sports Medicine Interest Group at ACSM. And today he's going to talk to us about his research that underlies the development of the physical fitness test and standards. So give us just a second here. We're going to get his slides up. Dr. Baumgartner will give a presentation of about 25 to 30 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the question box, and we will take as many questions as we have time for at the end. So at this point, we are going to get the slides up, and then we'll turn this over to Dr. Baumgartner. Okay, Neal, are you there?
Dr. Kraft, thank you for the introduction. Apologize for the technical problems. We're still trying to connect. We did everything like we did before, but it looks like we can press forward. You have the slides?
Yes. Do you see him up on your screen?
No, because he's still trying to hook up on that particular screen. But I have a copy of them in front of me, so as long as we go by slide number, we'll be okay.
Okay.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Apologize for the delay, but we have some exciting information to share with you coming here from the U.S. Air Force. If we can go to slide 2, please. All right. That's a standard disclaimer that we have to put out. Just letting you know that these are opinions of mine, not the U.S. Air Force necessarily. Wouldn't want to get us in trouble with our senior leaders. Slide 3, please. I put this picture in there for Dr. Kraft. We've been trying to convince her to come down to Texas to see the beautiful blue bonnets in the springtime, but as you can see in the lower part of the slide, some reason she doesn't want to come. Next slide, number 4, describes our mission. We have a threefold mission. The primary role is the exercise science consultant to our headquarters people who own fitness policy for the Air Force. Everything to do with the fitness policy program, the testing, assessments, etc. Our second role that we've been very busy with for the last 4 or 5 years is developing fitness tests and standards, and I'll elucidate on that throughout the briefing. And then we also do some environmental physiology, especially when we talk about career fields that have to wear a lot of gear that inhibits heat dissipation, bomb suits, G suits, etc. So we do some thermal work as well. Move on to slide number 5. I want to introduce what we call our tiered concept for fitness standards. First wrote about this in the late 90s, and we've executed this over the last 15, 20 years. The traditional approach to fitness standards, as you see in the slide, there is a standard normative curve. For many, many years, and still prevalent today throughout the world, both in our allied countries in NATO, as well as our sister services in the U.S., the typical pattern is to take a couple thousand soldiers, have them all perform some type of fitness test, something as simple as push-ups, and just rack and stack them from highest score to lowest score. So on that normal curve, you might have someone that can do 100 push-ups at the far right and someone that only does 1 or 2 at the far left. And then they'll take a percentile, the 9th or 10th percentile, and give that the pass-fail cutoff. And what that does is not much for you. It tells you how one soldier compares to another, but it doesn't tell the leadership or the soldier themselves whether or not they're healthy, ready for their general duties, or ready for their occupationally specific duties. So we knew we had to move beyond the traditional approach, especially in training, because your fitness tests, always we want to remember, they drive fitness training. So we, in the late 90s, early 2000s, we said we need to come up with something better. So let's go to the next slide, number 6. We started with the first tier, what we call our Tier 1 tests and standards, by trying to link the fitness tests and the standard on the test to a criterion objective. In this case, we looked most importantly at cardiorespiratory endurance and body composition. As I'm sure the audience knows, those are your two primary fitness components when it comes to a health outcome. And they're also important for performance, but especially for health. So I worked with another exercise physiologist, a preventive medicine physician, and an epidemiologist, all that are holding prominent positions throughout the country today. And we worked very hard in the 2001-2003 timeframe and developed a Tier 1 test with criterion objectives. If we go to the next slide, you can see a linkage that we developed. What is the test? What fitness component does it address? And how does it link not to how other airmen or soldiers do, but rather how it links to a criterion health risk? And we have enough in the literature, especially I give credit to Dr. Steve Blair and his wonderful work when he was at the Cooper Clinic and the work he continues to do in South Carolina, as well as his colleagues, Dr. Farrell and others, who have done a great job in coming up with the health criterion linkage. They can link a VO2 max, or in the Cooper case, different quintiles of fitness, aerobic fitness levels, to a health outcome. What is your health risk? What are the odds ratios for contracting prematurely your chronic diseases, right? As it lists there at the bottom, primary cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and cancers. And so on our test, the simple 1.5 mile run, if run with decent motivation and pacing, can give you a very accurate measure of VO2 max, which then is linked to a health risk. So that's the concept that we developed and have implemented in the U.S. Air Force since 2004. Now, you may ask the question, what is a 25-year-old staff sergeant in the Air Force? Is he really going to care, or is she going to care about their health risk? They say, oh, that's for you, doc, you old retirees. You know, you're worried about your cancers and diabetes and so forth. Well, unfortunately, as we know in our society today, our younger generations are not devoid of contracting these diseases. In fact, I have data on the entire U.S. Air Force, which is over 400,000 members. But out of that 400,000+, we have each year new cases, around 410, 415 new cases of type 2 diabetes in our active duty personnel, ages 18 through mid-40s, contracting diabetes primarily from lack of fitness. So, and we've already screened out the type 1s out of that. So we're looking at a database of about 5,000 members since 2003 looking at that. So it is no longer just the old retiree type concerns. And we know healthcare costs are very expensive, both in and outside the military. So if we move to slide number 8 and 9, I'll talk about the body composition portion that we worked. And this is a simple schematic showing you in slide number 8 that body composition, first off, is a physical fitness component. There are some who don't recognize that. ACSM recognizes it, National Strength recognizes it, and 13 other professional organizations recognize body composition is a physical fitness component. Sometimes it's hard for the lay airmen to conceptualize that because they say, I'm not performing something when I'm having my body composition measured. But we in the ACSM community clearly know that body composition is inextricably linked to fitness, especially aerobic fitness. So we need to assess it. So then you get into the situation, well, it's one thing to assess it on 10 subjects in your laboratory. It's another thing to measure 400,000 people at least once or twice a year. So how best to do that? So what we did is, since we were looking at health criterion standards, we know that central adiposity has a more direct link to health outcome than does total adiposity, and significantly better than other means of measuring the body. And I say the body mass and BMI, body mass index, are not true body composition measures. Is there a relationship between body mass and stature and then in turn body mass index to outcomes. You know, the 1959 and 1983 life insurance actuary tables would say there's a general linkage. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with the J-shaped curve. The higher the BMI, with early exceptions at the lightest weights, are related to disease risk. But BMI has a high misclassification rate. In fact, our Air Force special operators, which tend to have higher fitness than the rest of the force, I have recent data showing that 86% of them would be misclassified using your standard cutoffs of 25 kilograms per meter squared in BMI. So we do not use, as shown on the right-hand side of this slide, we don't use body weight, height weight, nor BMI. Now, the Department of Defense uses it, our sister services use it, but we in the Air Force do not. We go straight to central adiposity as depicted by the yellow circle there. We measure abdominal circumference. And again, using the body of literature, go to the next slide, please, slide number 9. This is a very nice depiction. This is a very good visual. Actually, Dr. Wilmore supplied these years ago. 2 CAT scans at the L4, L5 level, horizontal slice of 2 different individuals here. The individual in the top part, you can see the white circumferential area, that's subcutaneous or SAT fat. The black area is primarily organ tissue, muscle tissue. The center white area is the spine. And then that area outlined in the orange color, orangish yellow color, that's visceral fat that a lot of you are probably familiar with. That's your dangerous, labile, highly related to metabolic disorders fat, the one that tends to expand over time. Now, society would think over time, I'm older, therefore I can be fatter. No, it tends to expand as our inactivity goes up, as your activity decreases. And so the person in the lower portion of that slide, that's a CAT scan of someone who does not have, has a greater amount of visceral fat. Notice the subcutaneous fat, the muscle tissue, the spine are basically the same between the 2 individuals, but the visceral fat is what's different. And that's that dangerous labile fat that's associated with myriad diseases. Including sleep apnea, the diabetes, the heart diseases, the cancers, the cytokine releases that trigger cancers, etc. So for body composition, with health criterion standards, we went with abdominal circumference. We've been doing that on Air Force members since 2004. So we have a database of over 7 million tests today. And we're trying hard. I'll talk about that in a moment. Go to slide 10. Here we're looking at the aerobic standards. Again, we used the Cooper Clinic data, which is recognized by ACSM, as well as a fair amount of other literature. And we came up with the low risk, moderate risk, high risk that you see here. And you can see it doesn't take a very high VO2, upper 30s, lower 40s for males to move from the high risk to the moderate and to the low risk. And notice one thing we did here, the colors, red high risk, it's kind of like a traffic light. Hey, stop your behavior, fix your behavior. You need to get back on the right side of the picture here. And get a VO2 that's up out of the 20s and 30s and at least get into the amber and move on to the green. The amber, we added that. Most military, in fact, I just questioned my NATO colleagues, Austria, Australia, Britain, Canada, right on down the pike, Germans, and they, to a country, use just pass-fail standards versus a scale that you see here. We like the idea of a scale. 1, the traffic pattern is a nice color alert to the member to say, wow, I thought I was green, now I am amber. Warning signs, warning signs. Whereas a pass-fail standard, you can be green for many years and then suddenly slip into the red and it catches you off guard. So that's one nice thing about this, as well as incentives. The higher you move up the scale with your VO2, the lower your risk is. And then you can see the same risk for females. If we go to the next slide, this is back to the body composition. Here, abdominal circumference measured in inches for males with a corresponding health risk. The odds ratios listed there in the second column, the nomenclature of low risk, moderate risk, high risk, and then the point scale. And that's one thing we fixed in 2010. The point scale is the mathematical corollary to the health risk. If your health risk is the referent at 1.0, you get 20 points. If your health risk is 4.2, down at a abdominal circumference of 41 inches, your health risk is quite high. Now you dropped your points from 20 all the way down to 8.2. So higher the health risk, the lower the points. And it's a mathematical corollary. We fixed that back in 2010. Okay, so next slide, number 12, please. This just shows kind of a summary where we're at. I know I was asked to present some of the where we're going with our research. We have one of our senior leaders visiting next week. We'll be sharing this information with him. We developed, again, the Tier 1 concept back in '98, implemented it in 2003 and 4. Aerobic body composition have science-based criterion standards, as I just showed. Research for the future is highlighted in the blue here. One thing that we've done a little bit with is we've looked at the intra-data analysis of those multi-million data set, comparing aerobic fitness to body composition. Second, we've just started some work, and it seems simple on the surface, but it's very challenging to link databases, linking the fitness database with choose your outcome, primarily injury illness outcomes, as well as even performance outcomes, promotions, cognitive performance. We're looking at those variables as well. And that second bullet there in the blue, you can see those are some of the things that we like to look at. Obviously, we know in general, the lower the fitness, both aerobic and body composition, the higher the healthcare costs, the higher the absenteeism. And we have a little bit of evidence, not enough to publish yet, but we're just starting to scratch the surface on the relationship between fitness levels and duty performance, as I said, both not just physical, but also cognitive performance. We know that the lesser fit sedentary occupation worker, someone like a cyber warrior, or an IT expert, or linguist, they're in a chair 8-12 hours a day. We know that the lower the physical fitness, generally the lower the cognitive performance in their decision making. And that's critical for the future Air Force and air and space environment. And we've got some initial findings, some of my colleagues in RAND Corporation have helped me with. There is not a powerful, but there is a general linkage between fitness level and promotion rates for both our officer and enlisted members in the U.S. Air Force. And then thirdly, back to that first bullet there on the slide, first blue bullet, longitudinal. We'd like to set up a longitudinal database, much like the Cooper Clinic did, where we can track prospectively fitness levels and these various outcomes over the long-term time frame, because that really would result in your most powerful data. And the last bullet there, I'll be talking with our senior leaders about the concept of, we know there's that inextricable link between aerobic fitness and body composition, especially central adiposity. So two things here. One, abdominal circumference. You always have to consider it when you look at your test, your face validity. Most of our Air Force members, they understand it. The bigger I am around the central abdominal girth, the less fit I am. But some people argue, hey, I'm 6'4". Why is the standard for me the same as it is for the 5'1" person? Well, the science data, and several references in this, say that there is not a relationship, or that the relationship between abdominal circumference and a health outcome is not affected by stature. It just boils down to how much visceral fat is located in that central region, that labile fat. However, to help with the palatability for the acceptance of the test, which is very, very important when you're developing tests, how well is it accepted by the large masses, we're going to look into the waist to height ratio, stature versus abdominal circumference. There's some work done by an English lab primarily on that, Ashwell's work, but it's not to the point where we can just immediately apply it. So we're going to look at our blue suit data on that. Then we're going to look at that relationship of that to VO2 to come up with a fitness fatness index. And that'll help account for, we know the higher the aerobic fitness, that mitigates some of the risk, not all, but some of the risk of elevated central adiposity. More on that in just a moment. In fact, on the very next slide, if we go to slide number 13, there you can see that I did initial look at 85,000 Air Force members, and we found, yes, what we expected to find. The slower the run time, the greater the abdominal circumference. And you can see that in this graph right here. We can see members from green, low risk time, shifting through the amber, moderate risk, and on to the red, high risk zone. And that was true for both cross-sectionally for 85,000 airmen, but also a subsample of those we looked at longitudinally. If their runtime decreased over a period of 3, 4, 5 years, then their abdominal circumference typically increased over that same time. And we know from the literature, and quite a bit of evidence on this now, the chicken tends to be aerobic fitness and the egg is the body composition, i.e. I get less active, my abdominal circumference increases. The corollary, if I increase my activity and enhance my aerobic fitness, I can decrease the amount of that dangerous visceral fat. So that's the tier 1 picture. I'll be happy to take questions. I assume, Dr. Kraft, I take questions at the end?
Yes, we're going to save the questions to the end.
Okay, I'm going to hustle through the next part. I'll hustle through the next part here. I want to talk about the tier 2. So slide number 14, this is our tiered approach. We've got the tier 1 standards in place, but as the blue line in the middle says, a tier 1 test does not necessarily reflect on specific occupational military task achievement. So in 2008 through 2011, we started looking at tier 2, i.e., instead of the outcome being a health criterion standard, now we're looking at occupationally specific, operationally relevant standards. And congressional public law requires the military to do this as well. So we started this. It fell in accordance with what Congress wanted us to do, so we pressed forward. So slide number 15 shows you the various physical fitness components that I'm sure our audience is familiar with. And you can see by the depiction, tier 1 covers the first 5 components. When we move to tier 2, we broaden across all 11 components. And most of the time, and to date for us in the Air Force, the standards are higher as well in magnitude. Okay, slide 16, I pretty well hit this already. This is where I said we started this approach as early as the 90s, really got going in the 2011 timeframe, and then in 2013, the Secretary of Defense mandated the Women in Service Review, which opened up all career fields, no matter how physically challenging, to females. 99% of the Air Force career fields were already open to women. We only had a small number, about a total of 1,400 positions that were closed, and those are our special operators. They're all open to women now. Women can apply to any career field. But to determine these tier 2 standards, we wanted to take the right approach. So in 2011, we started our initial study with my colleague, Dr. Robeson at RAND, and we did a 5-step, if we go to slide 17, you can see 5-step process called the Physical Fitness Test and Standards Process. It's called BFOR, Bona Fide Occupational Requirements Process. You can look back at Constable and Palmer's document, the State of the Art report in 2000, that documents this very well. And I'm going to go through these steps real quickly and focus on some of the results we've had from our work in the next few minutes, maybe 10 minutes or so, and then we'll open up for questions. All right, slide number 18, Dr. Kraft, please. Step 1 in this process is a physical demands analysis. Here we do a multi-sub-step process to, we interact with the career field experts. So we started with battlefield airmen, which is a collection of 7 different special operations and conventional operations occupations in the Air Force, about 1,500 airmen, as I said earlier. The first step in this process is we had focus groups for each of the occupations. We spent about 3 days with those focus groups, having them objectively score a preliminary list of tasks that they're responsible to perform in their career. So pararescuemen, for example, they're responsible to know medical treatment, how to perform rescues in pretty much any environment, in the ocean, in the mountains, etc. So they have a long list of tasks they're responsible to be proficient at. And we went through those tasks, and they helped us delineate which ones are physical and which ones are non-physical. And the focus groups then helped us describe those tasks, describe them in their operational verbs. What's the physical requirement of the task? Then we sent those preliminary tasks out Air Force-wide, and you can see we had almost over half of the career field, those career fields score that objective. They scored it for frequency, duration, intensity. That determines the physicality, if you want to use that word, of the task. And they also scored it for criticality. Is it important for mission success? For example, a pararescueman must have the physical capability to drag a fellow airman out of a tough battle situation. If they've been ambushed by the enemy and someone's taken a hit and may be potentially unconscious, they need to be able to drag that person off the battlefield. And that's a challenging physical task, especially when you're loaded with gear. That would be a critical physical task. A non-critical physical task might be moving some equipment in a warehouse. That could be done. That doesn't necessarily prevent the mission from being successful. So we went through this multi-step process. We also went out in the field and we videotaped the physical movement patterns of each of those tasks, and we did a leadership interview. So this is a very detailed process. We go to slide 19. You can see how we whittled this down for each of the career fields listed there, from the preliminary physical tasks or the original task, the preliminary physical task, then to the CPTs, the critical physical tasks. From those CPTs, we built physical task simulations, and I'm going to show you a short video of that. Well, we'll try to if we can get it sent. And then go to the next slide, number 20, and that shows you the EOD at the bottom. We're just working on them. We're on step 4 of 5 with explosive ordnance disposal, so we're kind of overlapping with the battlefield airmen with them. We built 8 physical task simulations out of their narrowing process, their final 39. Go to slide 21, please, and that shows you some of these critical physical tasks, in this case for tactical air control party airmen who go out and call in airstrikes to help support the Army. And you can just read the verbiage there, and you can tell that there are physical tasks there. This is the one sample dealing with vehicles. And the 1A, 1B, those are the scores the focus groups and the assessments gave them on a 5-point Likert scale. So they were high enough to be considered physical. The next 4 slides, we can go through these quickly. 22 is the start. These are CPTs for the explosive ordnance career field. And slide 22 shows you some small unit tactics work they do. Slide 23 shows you repelling, combatives, casualty collection, a lot of physical things they do here. Moving ordnance at the bottom. You would expect the explosive ordnance people to be able to handle that. Slide 24 shows you the bomb suits that they have to wear. A bomb suit weighs 82 pounds and is very encumbering and retains heat. So that's a major physical exercise heat challenge for the explosive ordnance technicians. Locating, identifying, rendering safe explosive. This might be an IED. It might be a World War II ordnance that's left over on Okinawa. They have to deal with that. And so you can see a lot of physical things, sledgehamming, stakes, carrying a mine detector, etc. Slide number 25 shows range clearance work, airfield work, decontamination, and et cetera on that. I've got a few slides to show you of those. So a lot of physical work there. Those are the critical physical tasks. Slide number 26. This shows a couple samples of the work they have to do. An example there, extract an 84-kilogram casualty and 32 kilograms equipment from a combat disabled vehicle and move it to a viable vehicle. So our prototype test was able to identify these actual physical CPTs, whereas the incumbent test that is still in use today, we're about to replace this test. You look at the bottom of the slide, 3-mile run, 1,500-meter fin swim, pull-ups, sit-ups, push-ups, kind of a traditional test that was not created through a BFOR process. We compared this incumbent test to our prototype test, and one of the first findings is only anecdotal evidence at best for the current test that's in place. The standards are not objectively created. All right, let's go to slide 27. Now into step 2 of this BFOR process. Here, we start identifying physical fitness test candidates. And we're looking for candidates that address the fitness components as well as the physical fitness descriptors of the various 14 different movement patterns. Bending, twisting, rotating, squatting, pulling, pushing, patterns that you're familiar with. All right, step 2B, that's developing the task simulations for the CPTs. And I'll show some pictures of those. Step 2C then is linking those together in our actual data collection. So I'll get to that here in a moment. I'll come back to 2D later. Go to slide number 28, please. This is step 2A. Here we are, the list of the physical fitness components, the fitness descriptors, and again, we're looking for test candidates. With Battlefield Airmen, we started with almost 100 candidate fitness tests, quite a few. Pretty much everything you've done since middle school. Slide 29 is an example of one of those. This is farmer's carry, and it's just an example. It covers anaerobic metabolism, muscular strength. It has velocity, lifting, power, and isometric contraction descriptors in this test. And it has a fairly simple protocol, carrying 2 50-pound bags, one in each hand, over 100 yards or 100 meters in as fast as possible. All right, so our job is to link the fitness test candidates with the physical task simulations. So slide 30 is a listing of the Battlefield Airmen physical task simulations. There are 15 of these, 3 on a tower, so vertical movement, 10 on land, horizontal movement, and 2 in the water. That encompasses our pararescuemen. And there's some pictures there of a few of those. The top right corner is probably the most challenging of these. This is rope ladder. That subject you see in that picture has a 20-pound vest and a 50-pound rucksack, so 70 pounds on the person, plus about a pound's worth or two of boots and gear. So over 72 pounds of gear, and having to climb a canvas rope ladder. That ladder moves. It's hanging from a simulated helicopter deck platform, and they have to ascend 20 feet and climb up over the lip of the helicopter deck into the helicopter. And often they have to do that out of the ocean, so they have more weight because they're soaking wet. That is a very challenging task. We had fairly low rates for both males and females on that task. And then there are pictures of other tasks in there, but I'm not going to go through each one of these. I just want to give you a few samples. So slide 31 is a very good sample of a combat operationally relevant task. This is cross-loading personnel. So a military vehicle has been hit by an enemy rocket-propelled grenade or maybe an IED, and the vehicle's on fire and some of the occupants have been injured. So the member there is trying to do somewhat of a fireman's carry of pulling a casualty. We have a simulated dummy there. That dummy weighs 185 pounds and has a 30-pound armored vest on, so 215 pounds total. Where did we get that weight? We got that from our CPT work. The mean weight of our special operations forces that are involved in this work is 183.7 pounds, very close to the 185-pound dummy we have here. So the members have to be able to extract that casualty from the vehicle, drag them across the ground, and put them into a vehicle parked 15 feet away that's pulled up to help rescue these members. That's a very challenging task. The predictive test, one of several that predicted success and non-success on this operational task, is that farmer's carry I just previously described. So that's what we do. We try to develop a linkage between the fitness test statistically to the operational task. Success on the operational task leads to typically is success on the fitness test. I'll describe that here in a minute. Okay, the next four slides I'll go through quickly. This is our small unit tactics, which a lot of our special operations crew fields have to be able to do. So they rucked with a 30-pound vest and a 65-pound ruck, so 95 pounds, almost 100 pounds of gear, covering 5,000 meters as fast as possible. As soon as they're done with that, they go right into slide 33, which is reaction course. And here they have to drag casualty. They first do a 20-meter low crawl. You can see them doing that in the first picture there. In the second picture, that poor guy is very tired. And with the gear still on, he is dragging that 215-pound casualty 10 meters 5 times over, total of 50 meters, stopping every 10 meters to drop to the prone position and return fire. So up and down with all that gear on, that's a very exhausting task. Okay, the next one, part C, the maneuver course. Here they're going over a series of walls, and they have to lift their rucksack up and over those walls. And then through an agility course. Go to slide 35, casualty movement. The ability to carry, in this case, a 185-pound total casualty up a flight of stairs. That proves you can rescue your teammates in urban combat. And then also up a ramp we built. It's depicted there in the lower right corner of the picture. Go to the next slide, slide 36. You can see they go up a ramp that's the exact specifications of a C-17 airlift medical aircraft. So the ability to carry litters up the ramp into the aircraft and then lift that litter and hold it for 5 seconds, proving you have the physical ability to not just lift the litter, carry the litter, but also lift it to the right height of the stanchion, the holding apparatus in the aircraft. You don't want to drop your patient. So that's an example of very exhausting. That takes about an hour to do all of that. The 5-kilometer infill ruck march, then through all of these reaction courses and casualty movement. Slide 37 is a list of the physical task simulations for explosive ordnance disposal. Somewhat described those earlier. Slide 38 shows you the narrowing process. When we link the physical task simulation to the fitness test, we look at how well the fitness test predict. So if you look at the second bullet at the bottom of the slide, objectively we're scoring the content or predictive validity of the fitness test. How well does farmer's carry predict dragging casualties, for example? But also we look at other key factors. How well does that fitness test cover the physical descriptors? Lifting, pushing, pulling, velocity, bending, twisting. Thirdly, ease of administration, very important. The test can't be so complex that it's hard to administer Air Force worldwide. Resources, does the test cost a lot? Is there a lot of equipment involved? Subject skill requirements. A clean and jerk takes more training for the subject to learn how to do that than does a trap bar deadlift, for example. And then a series of discriminators as well to look at. Federal adverse gender impact, face validity, injury risk of the test. All of those are factors we consider in selecting the test, not just how well it predicts. Okay, next slide shows you some of our results. Again, I'm comparing in the middle column there the incumbent versus the prototype on the right-hand side. The prototype test on the right for our battlefield airmen includes a power test, medicine ball, agility, balance, coordination, a drill. We have both a 3-cone and a 2-cone drill. Muscle strength, hand dynamometer grip strength, trap bar deadlift. Muscle endurance covered by pull-up, weighted lunges, the 50-pound sandbag on your shoulders doing lunges. Extended cross-knee crunch is a very good bending, twisting core test. Farmer's carry I described, and then aerobically, the ubiquitous 1.5 mile run still does very well as the 1,000-meter distance row ergometer test with the Concept 2 rower. That the set of 10 tests there is much broader across the fitness components, much more predictive than the incumbent test. And I'll show you the data on that here on the next slide. Slide number 40 shows you the correlation values. We're looking for strong and moderate, and notice the 5-component incumbent test up top primarily has low and very low scores, whereas the 10-component prototype test covered down below has moderate and even a few strong scores. So it did a better job on its predictive validity. The next slide, and I'll come back to some more validity in a moment. Next slide is, you hear me saying success on the physical task simulation and non-success. Well, how do we determine that? We determine a thing called METs, minimally effective times. Every time one of our experienced airmen, operators, a pararescue man, a combat control, or a tactical air control party, when they finished, they were all men at the time we did the study. Women are now allowed to go into those career fields. But every time they finished one of the task simulations, small unit tactics, let's say that he finished it in 62 minutes, just over an hour. Within a minute of finishing, while he's still breathing hard, I would ask him, you just finished this task. Under the same conditions, the same exact task, how long would it take for your minimally acceptable performer in your career field to do that same task you just did? If he did it in 62 minutes, he might give me an estimate of 70 minutes. If he was very unfit and he knew he was unfit for whatever reason, maybe he was dealing with a combat-induced injury, he did it in 90 minutes, he might say, you know, a deployably capable, minimally acceptable performer should do this in 75 minutes. So that is actually it's a literature-supported methodology for determining success and non-success. So we took the estimated data and the actual data, presented that graphically in front of a small group of senior leaders in the career field, or very experienced leaders, and asked them the question, what do you expect your airmen to be capable of doing? In other words, what is the genuine operational requirement? And so they would come up with a time. So if we go slide over to slide 42, this shows you a sample relationship of a physical task simulation on the vertical axis compared to a physical fitness test on the horizontal axis. And that would be a very nice an R value of maybe 0.678, somewhere in there. That's pretty good gathering of data. Go to slide 43, and you see how the minimally effective time is that green horizontal line that goes right through the data. If you're lower than that line, i.e. on the y-axis, the vertical axis, you have a slow time. That means you have that you're operationally failing, and then above it, your operation is succeeding. Go to the next slide, and the operational analysts, statisticians work with us to determine the red vertical line, and hence now we have not only a test, but we have a standard for the test. Let me wrap up the last couple of minutes here with just three or four more slides to show you. Slide 45 shows you the predictive validity of the prototype test versus the incumbent across 4 career fields. You can see that it's on average 20% better in its predictive validity. So the left-hand graph there shows you kind of a spread of points on the incumbent test, whereas on the right-hand side, a tighter pattern of points, and hence the better prediction. Next slide, number 46, shows you the kind of idea there. We want to get good classification in the green quadrants and avoid errors in the red quadrants, especially that lower right-hand quadrant. That's dangerous for commander. That would mean the test is telling the commander that person is ready to go when they're really not ready to go because they can't complete the operational task. So this is called classification accuracy, and that is, we achieved 85% with the prototype, much better than the 66% on the incumbent test. And next slide shows the gender neutrality issue, and I'll wrap up with these last couple slides. This one shows you the incumbent test, and the left-hand graph has a significant bias, upwards of 6.6 PTS difference between men and women, where the right-hand graph shows you no difference for the prototype test. So if you follow the BFOR process, you're going to be gender neutral, and that's very important, especially to meet congressional public law. So in summary, the prototype test we were able to develop through this process is statistically significantly better than the incumbent test. And I can sum this up briefly by saying sit-ups and push-ups, although they're reasonable exercises, they are not good for Tier 2 occupationally specific, operationally relevant tests. I have more slides I can use to help answer any questions, but I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Kraft, back to you and the audience for questions.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Baumgartner. That was really great, very interesting. We have a few questions, and we have time for just a few questions. So this is a question that's coming in from somebody that's watching remotely. We also have ACSM staff here in the room. This says, the presentation has covered physical fitness testing. Is there an attempt to include other factors in human performance, including emotional stability, cognitive function, etc.?
Okay, quickly, the answer is yes. The role of our shop is primarily to address physical test and standards, but we know that our customers, our Air Force leaders, care a lot about, obviously, cognitive performance. A good example I'll give you to answer this question, we are currently working with explosive ordnance disposal. These are men and women who have to wear those very encumbering, heavy, hot bomb suits. They have to wear chemical protective suits in other portions of their job. And every single one of them that I talked to said when they have worn these operationally, whether it's in Iraq, Afghanistan, in different areas of the world, here in the United States, they have to wear these when they have domestic issues, terrorist issues. They have all said to a person that, yes, their decision-making ability is affected by that encumbering gear and the physical tasks they have at hand. The longer they're in the gear, the more challenging the task. So we are trying to objectively assess cognitive performance, getting some trained psychologists to help us out. Industrial organizational psychologists are well tuned in this area. So the answer is yes, we're going to try to address that in 2019.
Great. Okay, so we have another question. It says, I'm currently a DoD firefighter and reserve firefighter on Homestead ARB. I'm going to assume you know what that means, Neal.
Yes. Air Reserve Base.
Are there plans to create a firefighter-specific PT program?
Splendid timing with the question. Last Friday, I received a letter from the Pentagon from our Air Force Fire Chief. They have officially signed up for us to initiate research and development for a Tier 2 test for Air Force firefighters. So you couldn't have been more on target and more on time with that one.
Great. Awesome question. So when you're doing these fitness tests, you mentioned before that women are now have the ability to enroll in any of the occupations. I would assume, since there are more men than women in the Air Force, that when the women are undergoing these testing, they're also using, for example, the same 185-pound dummy plus gear, because it would be more likely that they would be carrying a man out of a difficult situation than a woman. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. And we try to account for the smallest as well as the largest subject. The rule of thumb in the occupational development is to take the mean or somewhere upwards of 80% of the mean to ensure that all members have the physical ability, because you can't predict in combat if it's going to be a small male, an average-sized female, or a large male that will be requiring casualty evacuation. So I've discussed this with my fellow NATO countries, but the answer is yes. One of the cleanest things about occupational test development is it's just that. It's so we don't have to account for, worried about gender differences per se. In other words, women don't just pull women out of combat, and men don't just pull men. You have to be able to do what the career field requirement is. And it honestly makes a lot of things a little bit cleaner.
Great, thank you. One of our ACSM staff members had a question. Gretchen is wondering, how often do you do the physical fitness tests, and are the airmen given specific plans or prescriptions to improve?
Oh, good. I have slides on that, but to answer her question, the frequency of the test is driven by leadership. So the typically the leadership will choose something like annual. The Department of Defense mandates that all services must test every member at least once a year. And we're trying to get that changed to allow the services more flexibility. However, and one thing we're recommending for the field is choose a regular periodic interval, be it 6 months, 12 months, 15 months. However, we're highly recommending what we call controlled random, so that the member could be given a no-notice test, get a notice 72 hours before and told that you must report to the fitness facility and take your test. That helps. It helps drive behavior that is, less of what we call the 11.5 month. The person says, "Well, my test is every July, so I'll be unfit from August till June, and then I'll kind of cram some fitness in just enough to pass my test, and then I'll resume that bad behavior." So controlled random helps prevent that. So we're recommending that to the group.
Great. We have another question. You mentioned that some of the folks have more stationary jobs. And so the question is about, do you have suggestions on how some of those folks who have more stationary positions, suggestions for them to be more active during the day in order to improve their performance?
Yes, we have one of our projects is to rack and stack all of the occupations in the Air Force. We have over 100 of those for both officers and enlisted, and put them in an order from the most physically demanding to the least physically demanding. And our initial estimates are probably only about 15 to 20% of our occupations have what we would call physically demanding beyond a sedentary position. And so the question is a very good one. As I cited earlier, we know that there's a relationship between physical fitness and cognitive performance, even for that sedentary person. So we have the same challenge and we appreciate ACSM's work here, the challenge to get people who are in inactive type occupations and professions, for them, how do we stimulate them to have regular fitness behavior? And we face the same obstacles you do, motivating people to do it. There's a long-term argument that goes on in the military. Should we mandate required physical fitness sessions or leave it up to the airmen to do it on their own recognizance? And there are pros and cons to both sides, and that becomes more of a leadership decision than it does a science issue. But yeah, we're well aware of that. Part of the product we deliver when we deliver a test is something that we care more about, and that is recommended physical training program for each of the specific occupations. So EOD, when we finish and we deliver them their multi-component test, we will, in fact, I've got a very good slide on this. Maybe, I don't know, can you jump to slide number 66 per chance?
Yeah.
Title BA Operator. I know we're tight on time here. If you look at that, that's an actual scorecard from a member in the red. 161 on grip strength, 43.5 on med ball, and so forth. So this is good feedback in three ways. One, it's scoring feedback to the member. Number two, it's feedback for that member's team leader to help determine what part of the mission the person's going to be very good at and what part they might struggle at. Thirdly, it helps tell the exercise specialist, the strength conditioning coach, the exercise physiologist, how to maintain the strengths and help change the training program to improve on the weaknesses of this member. So that's one way that we integrate physical training in with our test results.
Great. Thank you so much, Neal. I think at this point, we're going to wrap up the webinar. We want to thank Dr. Baumgartner again for a great presentation, a lot of really good information. And this, I think, is one of our best examples of how sort of research translates into very practical applications. So we really appreciate your time. Thanks everyone who joined us remotely. And with that, everyone here in the ACSM office is going to give Dr. Baumgartner a round of applause for thanks. And with that, we'll say goodbye.
you very much. And if there are interested ACSM members that are in the future want to work with us, they can just go ahead and email me.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.